Hello there, welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Karen and I'm one of the area managers at Discover the World Education. Prior to working here, I was head of department and pastoral deputy for over 20 years, and I'm absolutely passionate about effective pastoral care and offering students opportunities that build them as young adults ready for the future. The aim of today's webinar are to look at some thoughts and reflections on pastoral care post-COVID-19. We're also going to look at the geography curriculum links in Norway as a case study, some low carbon trip opportunities, and then Norway as a case study and possible trip destination. Effective pastoral care is a combination of so many different aspects. We want our students to achieve, we want them to be happy, to fulfill their potential and to embrace all that is offered to them. Someone once said to me, in the end, it's not what you do for your children, but what you've taught them to do for themselves. This quote is no more apparent than in the current times. We want them to, be successful young adults who are confident, resilient, adaptable, and independent. Resilience is not what happens to you, it's how you react, you respond to and recover from what's happening to you. And I often say to students, sometimes you have no choice as to what's happening to you at the moment, but you do have a choice in how you respond. And how you respond is ultimately how you will recover, how you will thrive in the future, and how you will build resilience. I think this quote is particularly important with the current global situation with COVID-19. Many of my teaching colleagues are expressing their worries and concerns as to how some of their students are reacting to the pandemic. They lack a little bit of resilience and independence. They're finding the lack of structure and routine very difficult, and this is affecting their self-esteem and their mindset. Understandably, this situation has actually been difficult for everybody. We call it the Corona coaster, and it's caused everybody to have up and down days. But for our students, the journey of recovery and how we help them to respond to this situation is what will help them to be more resilient in the future. So how as educators do we change what we are doing in the education environment to equip our students with the skills that they may need again in the future? We should be challenging our students, allowing them to face adversity and situations that are a little different to the norm and allowing them to take a risk. But how can we do this? We have signs everywhere saying don't run, don't, beware of the ice when the ice is there, maybe slippery when wet. We know that our students learn best when they are doing things. And how often do we see that small child touch the radiator, touch the oven, when even though you've said, don't touch it, it's hot, they actually have to do it to sort of learn from that experience. So we want to create opportunities to allow our students to be surprised, to do things a little different, allow them to take charge and allow them to make mistakes. Students are like little octopuses on their educational journey. They have all these arms and legs. They reach out, they grab every opportunity that is offered to them. They should be on a zip wire. They should be having fun, taking risks, smiling and laughing. And within their education journey, whilst they are at school, they have this safety harness. It's always there. It keeps them safe. It pops them back on that zip wire if every now and again they fall. And that safety harness is you. It's that education system. Resilience is a life skill. A typical 13-year-old has 180 days a year in school. I know that's slightly different at the moment, but on average, that's what they have. And schools provide the perfect environment to build resilience in our students. I have found throughout my teaching career that is often discussed in the early years, but with the pressures of exams, results, and general adolescent issues, older students will often find that they're left out of the classroom dialogue and that resilience isn't something that we always talk about. It doesn't always materialise organically for each student. We need to create these situations within a safe and comfortable environment that allows students to respond to challenges and respond to setbacks. When students have resilience, they are open to learning because they believe that they can learn. They are receptive to assistance because it is not a criticism of their abilities, and they are comfortable not knowing and understanding concepts immediately because they see learning as a pursuit of knowledge and know that motivation and effort are just as important as knowing how to do something. When students do not have these attitudes about learning, we must not only encourage them to be confident and to keep trying, but we should also teach them about resilience and perseverance. We really want to provide our students with the tools to be successful in the real world, where the safety harness is taken off, yet they still take risks, they have fun, they smile, they laugh, and they achieve. So let's take a look at a destination that you may wish to consider using as a case study in your classroom or as a travel opportunity in the future. Norway. I believe that this destination can offer your students not only an amazing geographically enrichment trip, but also an invaluable pastoral opportunity, particularly in building resilience. I'm going to take you through over the next sort of like 20 minutes or so, just sort of like some of like a bit of a virtual field trip on Norway actually, and looking at the different things that we are able to offer within this amazing country. I spent some time at the beginning of the year in Norway and was completely blown away by the things that it was able to offer our students. So Norway is officially the Kingdom of Norway. It is a Nordic country in Northern Europe. Its mainland territory comprises of the western and northern portion of the Scandinavian peninsula. It shares a long eastern border with Sweden. It has borders with Finland and Russia, and its extensive coastline faces the North Atlantic Ocean. Geographically, it sits between 57 and 81 degrees north, so it is part of the Arctic Circle. Norway is a land of mountains, of fjords, islands and glaciers. There are over 400,000 lakes and 239,057 registered islands. That's just the ones that are registered, let alone the ones that aren't. Climatically, due to the Gulf Stream, it does have 4 seasons, but the highlands generally have a subarctic climate with year-round permafrost in the mountains. Geologically, Norway is extremely old, with much of the bedrock being formed of granite. Slate, sandstone and limestone are also quite common, and in some of the lowland areas there are also marine deposits. As you can see from this picture, it is abundant with the most amazing waterfalls, glaciers, fjords, mountains, rivers, coastal scenery. So therefore our geography syllabus is just in abundance wherever you go in Norway. Norway has a population of just over 5.3 million. Its capital is Oslo, which has a population of just over 1 million. In terms of its income, it has the 4th highest per capita income anywhere in the world. So it's quite a rich, and wealthy country. More importantly than that, however, it ranks at the moment in 2020 number 1 on the Human Development Index. It is the first in the happiest place to live. In the OECD Better Life Index, it ranks number 1. It ranks number 1 in the Index of Public Integrity and also in terms of the Democracy Index. So therefore, its social and human and political geography is really, really important and a fantastic thing to study. In addition to that, it has the lowest crime rate in the world alongside Iceland. In terms of its social structure, it maintains a Nordic welfare model. It has universal healthcare and a comprehensive social security system. Its values are rooted in egalitarian ideals. Norway is aiming to be carbon neutral by 2030. 98% of its energy is renewable, mainly powered by hydroelectric power. And last month, the Parliament actually voted for an accelerated programme of carbon dioxide cuts. And what they are also talking about is an enhanced programme for carbon trading to offset the emissions. They have banned non-electric car production and the sale from 2025. And at the current time, for the first time in its history, there is a negative power price for domestic users. So therefore, domestic users are actually not having to pay for their electricity at the current time. Most of this is because they had a very, very heavy snowfall this winter, which has allowed the reservoirs to be very, very full. So therefore, the electricity company are giving some of that back to the community in Norway. In terms of the curriculum links, you can see the different things that it offers. Obviously, we have the glacial processes and landforms, weather processes and hazards, coastal and geological landforms, water and river processes, and economic change. And then we have climate change linked to sustainability, water resources, food resources, because they still do quite a lot of salmon and freshwater salmon farming here, energy resources, particularly in terms of sustainability, and then ecosystems as well. We could also look very much at the forward-thinking developments of energy resources here, because they are still talking about this link between Iceland, Norway and the UK to have an underwater ice link cable so that some of this more sustainable renewable power is shared amongst those three particular countries. In terms of the low carbon opportunities that this trip can give you, the flight time between the UK and Bergen is 1 hour 50 minutes. It's around about 650 miles away. In fact, it is our closest destination. So therefore, in terms of our carbon footprint, it is very, very low. And don't forget, Discover the World actually offsets the carbon emissions in any case. So, but I know that sort of like a lot of students are currently thinking to fly or not to fly. And, we can reassure them that this is our closest destination and it is something that is very much environmentally good for us. The Bergen City Railway is electric, it's completely carbon neutral, which means you can travel from the airport to Bergen city centre by way of this carbon city railway. It's very cheap, very sustainable, very efficient, and it is obviously completely carbon neutral. Once you're in Norway, there is a one centre accommodation, so no transport is needed during your stay. Yes, we have to get you from Bergen to Hardangerfjord. However, we do use the most efficient transport that we can. And once you're in that particular field, you then spend 3 to 4 days without moving outside of that particular area because all those activities are there. So in terms of our most efficient carbon-friendly trip, this is the one that really offers the best for you. So what is there to see and do in Norway? Now, as I said, I spent some time there earlier on this year, exploring all the different options. And not only from this geographical perspective, it was really very much from the invaluable pastoral opportunities that it can give. So what we do is we travel from Bergen down to the Hardangerfjord field. En route, we stop at this amazing waterfall. It's called Steindalsfossen. Steindalsfossen is a waterfall which is around about 50 metres high. This fall occurred in 1699 when the river changed its course. It has a typical undercut that you're able to walk behind. The waterfall has a groundwater source from a lake just above, and it comes from the Serva River. And the lake sits at around about 814 metres above sea level on the plateau above. So it is a groundwater waterfall, and as you can see, the rock formations from behind the waterfall are quite stunning. You then travel down to the Hardangerfjord. It's the 4th longest fjord in the world. the second longest field in Norway. It's around about 179 kilometres from the ocean. So the field itself is around about 179 kilometres long. It's from the Atlantic Ocean. At its deepest, it's around about 870 metres deep, and it's between 2 and 10 kilometres wide. So it really is a very huge geological formation. It also hosts the third largest glacier in Norway, Folgefonna, which is located on the field. And this glacial area is around about 220 square kilometres. And we'll look at this a little later in our tour. Our exclusive accommodation is located on the Hardanger Fjord. It is a family-run business, rather like ourselves, that offers an amazing activity-based trip for students. The real focus of this particular centre is on sustainability and responsibility. It is completely carbon neutral, powered by hydroelectric power from the rivers just above this particular camp. The students are accommodated in their own individual cabins, all within the safety and security of the holiday campus. They house between 6 to 8 students, and within each cabin you have a kitchen, a lounge area, bedrooms and bathrooms. Each morning they're given a hamper of provisions from which they produce their own breakfast and lunch. This is the most pastorally wonderful experience for the students, and they just love the independence that this offers them. Regular cabin checks are done, and students have the leadership opportunities in terms of organising the cabin and the provisions. And it really is wonderful to see some students who very often are very dependent on their parents or their carers or their grandparents to sort of like give them breakfast, give them lunch, give them supper. All of a sudden, they have these provisions, and it's things like cereal, they've got some bread there, they've got cheese and ham and eggs and juice and milk, and then they have the opportunity, and it is just amazing what these students actually can do. When they're given the opportunity to do it. They then have to clear up after themselves, which for some of them is something that they haven't really done before. We have a school group that goes to Norway every year, the International School of Lagos, and it is just amazing because they love using the Hoover. They love making their own beds, and they take pride in looking after their cabins, and they really rise to the challenge of this. They're also introduced to the centre as being very sustainable, very renewable, very responsible. So therefore recycling is everywhere. Food waste is very minimal. Water waste, very minimal. And it is great to see sort of like a bunch of teenagers who you wouldn't think would naturally do that. They actually sort of rise to the challenge. They rise to the environment that they're in, and they love that level of responsibility. Supper in the evening is taken all together in the dining room, and this is also where the evening activities happen. From this particular camp, you can participate in a varied programme of activities, which are not only fabulous and pastorally invaluable, but also they enrich their geographical learning. No transport is needed. All the activities and options are available from this particular centre. Our first activity that I'm going to show you is canoeing on the field. Instructors take the students first of all into a practice pool before escorting them out into the field. What better way to learn about glacial landscapes than canoeing down one of the most spectacular fields in the world? Archery is another activity that they can do, and it may be that sometimes if you have a large group, half of them go kayaking and canoeing, the other half do archery, and then they change over. So it really depends. And actually, some students may have never done archery before. And you find that quite often those students who haven't flourished and really shown their sporting ability at school, all of a sudden have the opportunity to do something that's a little bit surprising. And they're the ones that are rising to the top. One of my favourite activities in the Hardanger Fjord is the orienteering challenge, which takes the students into the forested valley sides around the edge of the fjord. Again, full instruction is given and the students really get the opportunity to develop their geographical and map work skills. I love the team bonding experience that orienteering gives them. There's some real leadership sort of experiences that they can have. And it is amazing how you find that quite often those natural leaders that you've seen at school are thrown a little bit out of their comfort zone. And this gives sometimes the more quieter group, members of the group, to actually come to the forefront and show their potential as well. The Via Ferrata is one of the students' most favourite activities, and I'm sure you can see why. Via Ferrata was a technique first used in the 1800s by Alpine explorers and was also used in World War I to transport the Italian and Austrian troops across the Dolomites. Under safe and instructed conditions, students have the opportunity to tackle this Via Ferrata, and then at the end, they have the opportunity to zip line back down. And this really is often the highlight of the students' trip in the Hardangerton Fjord. To do wall climbing, to do rock climbing, and then zip line back down. And they don't just get to do it once. They can do it 5, 6, 7, 8 times. As long as time allows, they can spend the whole afternoon or the whole morning doing this activity. Again, like we said about the canoeing and the archery, sometimes you can split your groups up depending on your numbers to make sure that actually everybody gets a really good experience and there's, not a lot of hanging around. Team building occurs naturally. On the left here, we have a group of students from the David Nieper Academy with their teacher, actually, Chris Ruddy. And he was telling me that team building just occurs naturally within the time spent here. The students have to tackle activities that they have never had the opportunity to do before. And they're faced with unknown situations, sometimes adversity, and they're encouraged to take a risk and to support each other. And it really is incredible how quickly these kids start supporting one another, communicating better. They can't have a phone in their hand when they're on the Via Ferrata. They can't have a phone in their hand when they're zooming down a zip wire. And it really is incredible to see how their communication develops and how it improves and how supportive they become. One of the most famous and spectacular walking trails in Norway and in the world actually is the Husedalen Trail. And this actually starts at the edge of the Hardangerton Park and it takes the students up a walking/hiking path passing 4 fabulous waterfalls. It ends at the edge of the Folgefonna Glacier. It's around about 4 kilometres long along the Kinzo River and it climbs an elevation of around about 840 metres. It is a whole day hike. It is fully guided with expert instructors and local guides. They take their picnic along with them. It takes around about 4 hours to get to this particular point, which is at the top of the hike, and then around about an hour and a half to get back down, as you can imagine. Students here are really taken out of their comfort zone. Many of the students that we take on the particular Norway trip are very much sort of city children. They don't often get to go outside and to do long walks. And actually our Norway sort of adventure, so to speak, is one of the trips that really allows these kids to get outside, to walk, to enjoy their surroundings. It's not on and off of a coach. It's not surrounded by lots and lots of different activities. It really is embracing the outdoors and everything that it has to happen, that it has to offer. If you did wish to venture outside of the Hardangerton area, there are a number of sites and highlights that can be experienced all within just a couple of hours of that particular base. Voringfossen is a 182-metre high waterfall in the valley of Madobalen. It is a narrow and steep valley dropping down from the Hardangervidda plateau. This waterfall has 5 drops and at its peak, so around about July time, there's around about 12 cubic metres of water flowing down this waterfall per second. It really is spectacular. This particular photograph was taken in early October, so you can just see the tremendous colours that happen in the autumn time. And I really do believe that sort of like October, April, May, late March is just the most perfect time to visit Norway. The Hardangervidda is the most spectacular place in this area. It is the largest national park in Norway. It is a vast mountain plateau and is the largest of its kind in Europe. It is quite cold all year and it has an alpine climate, as you can see from the vegetation in this particular picture. It includes some of Norway's largest glaciers, including Geological. In terms of its size, it's around about 6,500 square kilometres and has an average elevation of 1,100 metres. It is actually quite flat, as you can see, so it does offer the most amazing walking opportunities, particularly for kids who aren't used to walking. It's extremely ancient geology in this area, with rolling fells that are the remnants of mountains worn down by the action of glaciers during the ice ages. Reindeer herds often frequent the plains, and its unique landscapes provide a marvellous natural film location. And you're probably wondering why I have some sort of, stormtroopers going on the bottom right here. And that's because The Empire Strikes Back was actually filmed on one of the glaciers in Hardangervidda. Folgefonna National Park and Glacier is perhaps one of my favourite places in this particular area. It has been a national park since 2005. The whole area is only 545 square kilometres, so in comparison to the Hardangervidda National Park, it is actually quite small. But within this national park, there are 3 glaciers, and I'm a bit of a mountain and sort of like a lake person, as some of you will know. The largest one of these glaciers is between 300 and 400 metres thick, and the majority of the area sits at just over 1,600 metres above sea level. It's one of the wettest places in Norway. It receives just over 5,500 millimetres of rain per year, and that includes snow. Folgefonna can be translated as folga, meaning thin layer of snow, and fon, which means a mass of snow or a glacier made of snow. And this shows you that actually the glaciers here, the fonna being the glacier, are generally always covered in the folga, which is the thin layer of snow. Just to give you an idea about these glaciers that aren't retreating, in this particular area, they're not retreating at all. This year, they received over 5 metres of snow in the Folgefonna National Park. And right up until the end of May, they were still clearing snow from the roads. They have a ski season in the summer and the winter in Folgefonna National Park. And I was talking to one of the local glacier guides just in March, actually, about the glaciers retreating. And he said they really are very much in balance at the moment. And it's sort of like an annual retreat, which they had about 5 or 6 years ago, where the glacier moved back only by maybe a metre. But actually, over the last sort of like 4 or 5 years, they've been advancing. So this sort of like, goes against what we're reading about in terms of the glaciers retreating. There are 2 amazing activities that you can do here. There's snowshoeing, which you can see here, and then there is also a fantastic hike, and it really depends on the snow conditions at the time that you are in Norway. The snowshoeing is an amazing adventure. You are taken by expert glacier guides up and over the moraine, which is covered in snow, as you can see here on the right-hand side. You strap these fantastic snowshoes to your feet. They're a little bit more advanced than the sort of like the tennis racket type snowshoes that we traditionally think of. And then off you go for a 2 or 3 hour hike up and over the moraine around the base of the glacier. It really is a spectacular activity to do. If the snow conditions don't allow, then there is another thing that you can do, which is the Bondhus Valley hike. This is fantastic as you follow the ice road. It's a historic ice road, which wasn't really built for tourists at all. It was built for transporting ice for refrigerations in the towns and villages up and down the coast. But now it is used by tourists, and it is a fantastic hike that you can follow. Both options are great, and they give students a unique learning experience of lakes, hanging valleys, blue ice glaciers, and loads of different types of moraine. Norway in a nutshell is one of the most talked about scenic days out that you can have anywhere in the world. The historic Flam Railway takes you along the valley sides high up into the mountains, and students have the opportunity to then take an informative and stunning journey on a state-of-the-art, technologically speaking, electric boat along the fjords. Sustainability and responsibility is key on this day. All the trains are run by HEP, and the power of the boat is also electric. There's no noise, and it doesn't affect the natural habitats. And the boat is also designed to produce very little wash, so it doesn't have any impact on the valley sides through erosion. It really is the most wonderful day where you go on a 100-year-old cog railway, a fantastic fast train from Bergen or Voss, and then this tremendous boat fjord day as well. The Sima power plant is one of the most amazing feats of engineering. Sima has two power stations, Langsima and Seasima. Production of electricity here started in 1980. The tunnels and shafts were blasted into the mountain to a total length of 61 kilometres, and the reservoirs are high up in the mountains, all with rock-filled dams. The plant regulates 3 waterfalls in total, and it's regarded worldwide as a stellar example of the art of hydropower engineering. And as we already know, Norway has 98% of its power comes from hydroelectric sources. So this really is something that is fundamentally part of the Norwegian way of life. As most of the tunnels are within the mountain, it does have little impact on habitats and ecosystems. And the Norwegians and the engineers and the scientists were very careful as to how the dams were constructed to ensure sustainability right the way across the environment. Bergen. Now, Bergen is very famous, actually. It's where the composer Edvard Grieg came from, and it's also one of the places that was quite often visited by Roald Dahl. So you probably have heard of Roald Dahl. He's obviously a very famous author, and Edvard Grieg is a very, very famous composer. And both of these sort of famous Norwegians used to come to Bergen quite a lot. Quite often Bergen is considered to be sort of, a little bit more popular than Oslo. But Bergen is the second largest city in Norway. It has a population of around about 225,000 people. And one great activity when you're in Norway is to visit Bergen, either en route to or from Hardangerfjord from the airport, because the airport itself is actually in Bergen. Bergen is on Norway's southwestern coast. It's surrounded by mountains and fjords, including Sognefjord, which is the country's longest and deepest fjord. There are amazing colourful and wooden houses on the old wharf. Bergen is a UNESCO World Heritage City and has been the European City of Culture. The city was founded in 1070 by King Olav Kyrre. It's a very important European city of trade in the 13th century, as the Hansas opened one of their 4 offices on the wharf, making Bergen a European hub of commerce, seafaring and craftsmanship. Today, Bryggen is a reminder of the city's importance as a part of the Hanseatic League and has a place in the UNESCO's World Heritage List. And you can see some of the amazing wooden buildings that sit on the wharf in Bergen. And these can be very, very easily explored by the students quite independently. also within Bergen, there is a brand new self-guided, student-friendly tour around Bergen that I've put together. It's a very, very small, safe city with easy to navigate streets, which take in all the main sites and highlights. You may wish to take the funicular railway up the Fløyen mountain to gain a fabulous panoramic view of the city, or enjoy one of the very popular reindeer hot dogs. It's not something that I've chosen to eat myself. However, students love them, and they're quite reasonable in the city centre, which is great. On the right here, we have Ole. He is a local guide who is heavily involved in the sustainability plans of Bergen and Norway. Ole has introduced a brand new initiative which allows our students to plant trees in the mountain areas around Bergen. Ole himself, he grows the seeds into small little plants, and then the students have the opportunity to take these sort of like, very young trees and plant them within the mountainous areas around Bergen. And I think this is something that is absolutely fantastic. And bearing in mind this generation who are very conscious about what they can do to help sort of like, counterbalance the impacts of climate change. And we know that tree planting is something that is very, very important within that strategy. This is something that they can do as a lasting impact during their educational pastoral trip. And Ole here is a local guide. He is just fantastic, and he is allowed to sort of like plant these trees in this particular area. On this particular trip, we really encourage students to follow our 4 pillars of responsible travel: to be safe, to be curious, to respect the people, and particularly to respect the places that they visit. And you can see here some of the things that we encourage our students to do. I hope that I have given you enough information about Norway and our student tour that we have here. It really does provide the most invaluable opportunities for your students to respond to the current global situation, enabling them to recover, build their resilience, and allow them to really thrive in the future. Please do discover more on our website. There are sample itineraries and costings. And if you have any questions at all, then please do email me via the Discover the World Education link on the website. Please do remember that the world is a book, and those who don't travel read only one page. We know the benefits of taking students abroad, and I think that Norway can offer them something that is valuable, both in terms of the pastoral curriculum as well as the geographical curriculum. Have a wonderful afternoon, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you at more of our webinars in the future. Thank you, goodbye.